Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'll be listing the best coaster at every park in the entire United States. The only rules for this video is a park must have at least 2 coasters that are currently operational or are SB&O and likely to become operational soon. And before starting to do research for this video, I guessed that there would be about maybe like 30 parks in the big chains of Cedar Fair, Six Flags, and things like SeaWorld and Hershend, and there's plenty of smaller independent parks, and maybe about like 50 or so different ones. And it turned out there were a lot more. There are exactly 125 parks that qualify, so I'm going to be going quick because even if I spend only 30 seconds on each park, that's over an hour long, and I mean, you see the length of the video, it's long enough. The parks will be in alphabetical order, and let's begin. To begin the list, we have Rewind Racers at Adventure City in Anaheim, California. This is a Gerstlauer shuttle coaster, one of only 5 in the world, and the only one in the United States. And while it's nothing too special, it's pretty similar to a Vekoma Family Boomerang, if you're familiar with those. But it's an alright ride with some decent theming. Next up, we have El Loco at the Adventure Dome in Las Vegas. There's actually a bit of a tough call between this and Canyon Blaster and Aero Custom Looper, but I decided to give this the edge just due to its more comfortable ride experience and relative uniqueness, as long as you ignore the fact that this is a clone. Next up is a relatively easy choice with Monster at Adventureland, Iowa. Monster is an exceptionally fun-looking Gerstlauer Infinity coaster, and arguably one of the best Gerstlauers out there, beating the admittedly relatively weak Res's selection at this park. Next up with Adventureland Long Island, we have Turbulence, a pretty basic mock spinner similar to something like Sierra Sidewinder at Knott's Berry Farm, but when your competition is a really weird-looking 4D free spin, this is going to get the edge. Next up, we finally get to one I've actually been on, and that's Adventure Park USA with Wildcat. It's a basic Schwarzkopf Wildcat. We'll be seeing other rides similar to this later. Next up is another pretty easy choice with Rampage at Alabama Adventure. Rampage is a wooden coaster by CCI that I have heard is a bit rough, but also delivers a great layout with some solid laterals and airtime. Next, we have the first one of those parks, All-Star Adventures in Wichita, Kansas with Dragon Coaster. It's a Wisdom Rides Dragon Coaster. It beat out a Minor Mike. Next up is an interesting one. Anakeesta in Gatlinburg, Tennessee is just a mountain park that happens to just have 2 alpine coasters, because there's a lot of parks with 1 alpine coaster. Like, that would be most of the list without the 2 coaster qualification. But anyways, I'm giving the slight edge to Rail Runner due to it just being a more unique model and giving some decent looking laterals. Next up is Arnold's Park with The Legend, an old PTC wooden coaster that has an ace landmark. I've heard it still runs relatively smooth, and with little competition, that easily gets the nod. Next up, finally finishing out the A's category, is Barreling Rapids at Austin's Park, which is the first of likely many SBF Visa spinners. Next up is Beach Bend, which is another one of those parks that has like 1 good coaster, a Wild Mouse, a kiddie coaster, and that's pretty much it. So, like all the other ones, Kentucky Rumbler, the GCI at the park, wins by a landslide. It's a solid layout, solid airtime, bit rough GCI. Next up is the Biloxi Beach Hurricane at the Big Play Entertainment Center. It's similar to a Pinfari Zyklon Galaxy, but instead it's made by SPF Visa for some reason, and it was opened in 2022. Doesn't look amazing, but it beat a kiddie coaster okay. Now we finally get to the first big park and great ride with Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. While Busch Gardens Tampa has a lot of great rides like Montu and Kumba, honestly, no question, Iron Gwazi is one of the best coasters out there. It wins. Now up north to its sister park, Busch Gardens Williamsburg has Pantheon, an intimate multi-launch that, while not as good as Iron Gwazi, is still easily now the headliner of that park, and a very solid ride, as finally it's another coaster I've actually been on. Now for our first Cedar Fair park, we have California's Great America, which might, maybe, I don't know, be closing. I'm not sure what the deal with that park is. But Railblazer is easily the best ride there. It's one of the original RMC Raptors, and it has pretty good rock work and theming, while having a very whipply, intense layout with amazing airtime. Next up, we have Camden Park in West Virginia, which is another one of those classic old parks that has pretty much nothing outside of a kiddie coaster and an old wooden coaster, and in this case, it's Big Dipper. The next park, Canopy Lake Park, follows along generally a lot of the same lines, but it also has a Gerstlauer Eurofighter in Untamed, but I'm still giving the edge to Yankee Cannonball. Yankee Cannonball is another one of those old Ace Coaster Landmark PTC wooden coasters that are a bit rough but generally fun, have weird airtime, buzz bars, all of that. And I think it generally looks a bit better than a weaker Gerstlauer Eurofighter and Untamed. Next up, we have Carowinds, which is a way bigger park than most of these, and has a pretty obvious choice in Fury 325, a very solid B&M Giga, and arguably one of the best coasters in the entire world. Next, we have Hydroset Casino Pier along the shore of Jersey. This is an okay enough Gerstlauer Eurofighter, which are generally fun models, while some are more interesting than others. This is one of the less interesting ones. It still gets the edge over Pirates Hideaway. Ugh. Castle Park is another one of those parks that barely qualifies, as it has one kiddie coaster and then the other one's a spinning wild mouse. It goes to Screamin' Demon, the spinning wild mouse. Castles and Coasters in Phoenix, Arizona, consist of two coasters by everybody's favorite manufacturer, Hopkins. Well, they aren't inherently bad, they are very weird rides, but of course Desert Storm gets the slight edge, being a more thrilling coaster with inversions and some very, very interesting inversions at that. Next up is some park named Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, with an RMC hybrid Steel Vengeance. I was on it one time. I think pretty good. Apparently it's my favorite coaster ever. I don't know too much about it, but yeah, it goes to Steel Vengeance. Now here's a park people want to hear about. Cedar Valley's Wild Frontier Fun Park, somewhere in Michigan, has Galaxy 500 coaster, an SDC Zyklon Galaxy ride that has been moved around and was originally built in the 70s, and it beat out a kiddie coaster if you're wondering. Next up is CJ Barrymore's Family Entertainment Center with Loop Roller Coaster. And do you guys know what Pythonic Playland's Castaway Cove is? Yeah, it was a Pinfari looping Zyklon, which was terrible and everybody hated it. But yeah, I didn't know this until researching for this video, but apparently it was relocated to some random family fun center in Michigan and still torments guests to this day. And surprise, surprise, it beat out an SPF Visa spinner. Oh boy, we have another beloved, real good coaster with Hellcat at Clementon Park, a terribly rough S&S wooden coaster. I'm glad they switched to making launch coasters. Get this, it beat a kiddie coaster. Ah geez, what's up next to Vacoma SLC? No, it's New Mexico Rattler at Cliffs Amusement Park in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is a pretty solid, small-scale CCI wooden coaster with a bit of a rattle, but a solid airtime-filled layout. Following this is the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium, which has coasters for some reason, and its best being Sea Dragon, an old PTC Woodstock Express clone, but it's the original, so it's better, maybe? Next is Coda Land in Austin, Texas, which, despite very soon building two exceptional looking coasters with Palindrome and Circuit Breaker, currently does not have either of those and is stuck with its best coaster being Texas Wildcat, a Schwarzkopf Wildcat. Next, Del Grosso's Amusement Park, yes, the pasta sauce, in Pennsylvania, has Crazy Mouse, a spinning wild mouse. Nice job on the participation trophy. Next is Dino's Wonder Wheel Park, the smaller and worse in every way Coney Island Park right next to Luna Park, but it still has Phoenix, which is a new-gen Vacoma suspended coaster, which looks pretty fun despite being more family-oriented. After this, we have the two Disney parks, the first of which being Disney's California Adventure with Incredicoaster, an okay enough Intamin launch coaster, more oriented towards families with like 17,000 brake runs or something. It's an alright looking ride, but again, it beat a wild mouse to get here. I don't know what you expect, it's a Disney ride. Then over at Disneyland, we have Matterhorn bobsleds, and while you could make an argument that something like Space Mountain is slightly better, I gave the edge to Matterhorn just because of how revolutionary of a ride it was, and the fact that the mountain looks cool. Next is Raging Cajun at Dixielandin, and while I was debating whether or not that should be counted for the list, since all three of the coasters at Dixielandin have been standing on but not operating since 2020, I decided to, since they might reopen, but oh yeah, Raging Cajun, it's a low tier Vacoma boomerang. That's it. Next up is Dollywood with Lightning Rod, and despite it being closed when I went, this still looks like, obviously, easily the best ride at the park, with some world-class airtime and a fun launch up the... Oh, wait, never mind, they're getting rid of the launch. Screw this ride, Mystery Mine wins. Then back to Cedar Fair Parks with Dorney Park, we have Steel Force. And while I know Talon's the more generally agreed upon ride to be the best, screw you, Steel Force has really good airtime, especially in the back half. and that Helix is fun, and it's easily the best ride at the park. I love Morgan. Next up, we have a truly historic ride at a truly amazing park, Kingdom Coaster at Dutch Wonderland, the first ever CCI wooden coaster. It's a small family park located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which slightly beat out a short-looking S&S family suspended coaster. Next is Edaville Theme Park in Massachusetts, and they have a small Zamperla family coaster, which is fine, that's pretty standard. But what I'm confused about is the name of this coaster. RCDB currently says it's called Matterhorn Mining Company, and it was originally themed to Thomas or something like that, but that's irrelevant to this. But in my notes, I had this listed as something called Alpine Autobahn. So I was thinking I just made a typo, but when I type in Alpine Autobahn on Google, this stupid coaster comes up. So what is this called? Matterhorn Mining Company or Alpine Autobahn? Alpine Autobahn doesn't show up anywhere on the current RCDB page, but it's still called that on Google? This is stupid. I don't get this. Okay. So next we have a Lich Gardens located in Denver, Colorado, but it might be moving or closing, or I don't know what's going on with this park either. But it has an Aero shuttle loop, a pretty rare model called Sidewinder that looked pretty fun. I haven't been on any of the clone, but it's better than a mediocre wooden coaster in Twister 2. Twister 3, whatever it's called. Next, we have Enchanted Forest in Oregon with a notoriously weird coaster, Ice Mountain Bob. This is a small, very compact car, awkward bobsled coaster with like a bunch of laterals or something located in the middle of the woods in Oregon. I don't know. Looks pretty cool. Beat out a log flume that's a coaster somehow. I don't know what's going on with this park. It's weird. Next is Family Kingdom Amusement Park, which you might be wondering what that is. I was too, but it's the Myrtle Beach Boardwalk Park that has Swamp Fox at it. Swamp Fox easily wins, being a pretty fun-looking wooden coaster compared to a bunch of mediocre kiddie coasters. Next up is Frontier City in Oklahoma, with the obvious choice being Silver Bullet, a pretty decent-looking smaller Sierra Schwarzkopf with the single loop. It's better than some of the other garbage at this park. Okay, not garbage, but you get it. Okay, next, rapid fire round. The 3 Fun Spot parks all have a bunch of mediocre coasters and then one headliner that's way better than the rest of the park. Okay, Fun Spot Kissimmee, Mind Blower, pretty fun but also rough looking wooden coaster with an inversion made by Gravity Group. Fun Spot Orlando, another decent looking but rough looking wooden coaster made by GCI called White Lightning. And finally, Fun Spot Atlanta, a top 5 coaster in the world in Air Force One and RMC. Wait a minute, that breaks the pattern. Okay, next we're back to the classic small park that nobody's ever heard of with one good wooden coaster, with Excalibur at Funtown Splashtown USA in Portland, Maine, a pretty solid looking CCI that I've heard held up pretty well but isn't anything too special. Next is Gilroy Gardens, a small park formerly operated by Cedar Fair in California, with a decent looking mine train and Quicksilver Express, beating out Timber Twister, not Twisted Timbers, we'll see that ride later. Next is Glenwood Caverns, that one park that's really high up and has that good drop tower in Colorado. Has Defiance, a relatively new Gerstlauer that I've heard is a bit short and a bit underwhelming, but still a very solid looking Gerstlauer Eurofighter. There's a lot of those on this list. Okay, next we have Grady's Fun Park in Illinois. The ride that won's called Orient Express, and it beat a ride called Dragon Wagon. I'm done with these parks. Next we have Hershey Park. I've been to Hershey Park many times. The best coaster at Hershey Park is Wildcat's Revenge. Moving on. Next for Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana, we have The Voyage, which is a pretty obvious choice for the first ride. It's a very good looking Gravity Group. I think it's more interesting to discuss what the second best ride at this park is, but The Voyage is obviously the greatest. Okay, Idlewild, another small park in Pennsylvania. We've seen a lot of those, and it has Roller Coaster, an old but okay enough looking wooden coaster. This beat a Vekoma Wild Mouse. I didn't even know this existed. Indiana Beach, on a beach in Indiana, has a lot of interesting coasters, but easily the best is Cornball Express, a pretty solid looking CCI, which I've heard has held up pretty well and features lots of fun. Yeah, fun. I have no idea what this ride's like. Okay, next is Jenkinson's Boardwalk in Point Pleasure in New Jersey. It has 2 coasters, Shark Escape, Tidal Wave. Shark Escape's a small family coaster, and Tidal Wave's an SBF Visa spinner. They're very close in quality, but my friend said to choose Shark Escape despite not knowing any information on either ride, so I'll trust him. Yeah, so I decided to combine the 2 Jolly Roger parks in Ocean City, Maryland, just for simplicity's sake. And I decided to give the edge to Looping Star, just because it's a bigger ride, it has an inversion, and while it's probably not as good as some of the family coasters at the regular park, I'll give the edge to Looping Star. Okay, so next up is now Looping Star at Keansburg Amusement Park in Keansburg, New Jersey, which is the exact same model of ride. This video is so fun. Next up is the speedy and airtime-packed ride Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. One word, Morgan Rides. Oh wait, never mind. Kentucky Kingdom, being famously saved after Six Flags abandoned them, had Storm Chaser, an RMC conversion of one of their old wooden coasters. I don't think there's been an RMC that's lost yet. Next up is King's Dominion with Intimidator 305. Oh, but you thought it was going to be Twisted Timbers because of what I said in the Gilroy Gardens segment? Think again. Intimidator 305 is one of my top 3 favorite coasters ever. It's the most intense coaster in the entire world. Some okay airtime, but amazing whip on those turns, and it's just so fun and intense and tall and all that stuff. It's so good. Screw you, RMC, except for all your other entries on this list. At its way better but also kind of worse sister park, Kings Island, we have Mystic Timbers, which is arguably the best GCI out there with it's just straight airtime. I like airtime. I haven't been on Orion, but I can't imagine it being better than this. Okay, it's the next edition of Small Park in Pennsylvania, with the wooden coaster being the best one, with Knoebels, which is slightly less small than the other ones, but obviously Phoenix wins. Amazing buzz bar restraints, amazing airtime. It's been kept great, runs smooth as ever, really fun. I don't think I need to justify it. Still not the best wooden coaster in the world, golden ticket. Next, we have another Cedar Fair Park with Knott's Berry Farm, with the win easily going to Ghost Rider, one of the best wooden coasters out there, being very long, very fun, and being exceptionally smooth after the GCI retrack. Next, we have Lagoon in some random place in Utah I'll never go to, with the easy win going to Cannibal, a really fun made-in-house elevator lift, lagoon roll, Gerstlauer Eurofighter thing. It's way better. It's way better than it sounds, and I mean, there's a picture of it on screen. It's great. Lake Compounds in Connecticut has one of the best wooden coasters out there, Wildcat. Oh, sorry, never mind. Boulder Dash, which I have heard is a bit rough, but it has new Titan track, has some amazing airtime, in a great layout throughout the woods, using the terrain to its advantage and being overall really solid. Okay, what's the small Pennsylvania park with a wooden coaster being the best ride? Count at now. Just increase it by 1, because Leap the Dips at Lakepond Park is the oldest operational coaster in the entire world. And it's actually pretty fun. It's nothing amazing, but I mean, for being the oldest coaster out there, it's pretty good. Next up is Cyclone at Lakeside Amusement Park in Denver, Colorado. And while I don't exactly understand what's going on with this ride, it's SPNO, but might open soon, I'm not sure. It's a decent looking wooden coaster at a pretty overall weak looking park. Next up is Lake Winnie, let's just call it Lake Winnie. Anyways, 2 operating coasters, Wacky Worm and Cannonball, a okay looking older wooden coaster. Take a wild guess why I chose Cannonball. Now this is what I was talking about like 5 minutes ago. Twisted Timbers at the Land of Make-Believe in Hope, New Jersey. It's an SBF Visa spinner, but it beat a really small ENF miler. It's Twisted Timbers, guys. What can I say? It's so good. Okay, another lightning round. 3 Legoland parks. Legoland California has Technicoaster, a smaller, not great wild mouse, but who cares? Legoland Florida, Coastersaurus, a small-scale, decent, okay-looking GCI. And Legoland New York, not much competition. It's Dragon, which is a dragon coaster. Woohoo. Yes, the best worst park in the United States, Little America. A really weird park located in Wisconsin, has a bunch of really old rides at it. The best of which being a small wooden coaster called Meteor. I don't know, this is a very interesting park. Next is Live Oak Canyon Farm. Yeah, a farm made this list in California, which has an SBF Visa spinning coaster which beat out a kiddie coaster. There's a lot of those. Next up is the relatively new Lost Island Park in Waterloo, Iowa, with the most obvious choice ever in Matugani, a relocated Intamin launch coaster, which seems to have a pretty decent launch and just seems more like a mini version of Stormrunner. The famous Luna Park in Coney Island has the famous Coney Island Cyclone. Not much to say here, it's one of the most influential coasters ever, and it's pretty solid from what I've heard. Next is Magic Springs Theme Park in Arkansas, with Arkansas Twister, a pretty basic out and back wooden coaster, but it looks pretty decent. And also shout out to X Coaster, the United States only operating Mauer Skyloop, and Big Bad John because the name's funny. Everybody's favorite Cedar Fair Park, Michigan's Adventure, comes up next, with the obvious choice being Shivering Timbers, a huge CCI with some really solid airtime that still runs relatively well, with only a few potholes from what I've heard. Maurice Pier in Wildwood, New Jersey, has a few okay rides, but the best of which being a mediocre CCI coaster, Great White. While the ride does run pretty smooth, doesn't really have too many forces outside of maybe the first drop, but it's still an alright wooden coaster. Next is Mount Olympus in the Wisconsin Dells, with 4 wooden coasters that vary ridiculously in quality, with the best of which naturally being Hades 360, the first ever wooden coaster to go upside down after it was remodeled from just Hades. And while the ride has a terrible rattle from what I've heard, it is a crazy amount of airtime, it's a great layout, and you go under the parking lot, because why not? Next, for the 2 Nickelodeon Universe parks, first we have the one in Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota, with SpongeBob SquarePants Rock Bottom Plunge, a very average-looking Gerstlauer Eurofighter, not too much to note there. Same with Nickelodeon Universe in New Jersey, with a much better Gerstlauer in TMNT Shellraiser, and also the steepest coaster on Earth. If that wasn't already enough Gerstlauer, next is Adrenaline Peak at Oaks Amusement Park, a park with not much outside of this okay Gerstlauer Eurofighter in a slab of concrete. Next is Sea Viper, located at Palace Playland in Maine, which is a coaster. I don't really know anything about a Preston and Barbary Anaconda 2.0. I don't know. It's a ride with some really solid looking laterals and a fun compact layout. Quasi Amusement Park is pretty basic and has Wooden Warrior, a very solid looking family gravity group coaster. We'll be seeing more of those later on the list. Rowdy Bear's Smoky Mountain Snow Park is another one of those alpine coasters that just happens to have 2. This is the one with the shooting coaster, but Avalanche Snow Coaster just looks better since it's more thrilling, because the shooting coaster is kind of lame, honestly. Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk is another relatively small boardwalk park with a decent wooden coaster in Big Dipper, but this time it's in California and on the West Coast. Next up is Super Cyclone at Santa's Village Amusement Park in Illinois. It's a Pinfari Galaxy ripoff. It's the only thrill coaster at this park. Next up is Seabreeze in Rochester, New York, with Jackrabbit, a 1920 wooden coaster that is one of the oldest currently operating wooden coasters and looks overall pretty solid, but pales a bit compared to the other Jackrabbit 1920 wooden coaster. Next is the SeaWorld Park, starting with SeaWorld Orlando, with the obvious choice being Mako, which is arguably the best B&M hyper out there. It's just a better version of something like Candemonium at Hershey. It has a lot of great airtime hills, solid theming, and is better than Manta and Icebreaker, and man, that park's gotten a lot of new coasters. Okay, then following this is SeaWorld San Antonio with Texas Stingray, and as much as it pains me not to give it to the Morgan Mini Hyper Electric Eel, unfortunately, Texas Stingray is a very solid looking new gen GCI it's a new gen GCI, what do you want me to say about it? SeaWorld San Diego has one of the weaker B&M dive coasters with Emperor, but a still very solid looking B&M dive coaster. These SeaWorld parks don't have much to talk about, they are all pretty definitive winners. Add to that small park in Pennsylvania wooden coaster count or whatever that was, with Oscar's Wacky Taxi, the coolest and most epic coaster of all time. It's another small-scale gravity group wooden coaster that's really solid for its size and really solid for a park themed to Sesame Street. Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri has Outlaw Run. As cool as Time Traveler looks, the RMC Topper Track is going to beat that. Silverwood is a random park in Idaho that actually would have been interesting if RMC didn't come and ruin it with Stunt Pilot, a first-generation Raptor coaster. It has good airtime, it's really whippy, it's great, it's like the other Raptor I talked about. Okay, it's Six Flags time. Starting off with Six Flags America, the best park in the chain, because I'm talking about it first. Superman Ride of Steel. It's a weird, intimate, hyper coaster thing with straight track. I love the straight track. Next is Ride of Steel at Six Flags Darien Lake, which is like a weird, intimate, hyper thing. It has straight track. I like straight track. Next is Six Flags Discovery Kingdom with Joker. Arguably the worst RMC hybrid, is still easily clears the rest of this park, even with a solid B&M Floorless and Medusa. Take note, Six Flags America, Roar sucks. Six Flags Fiesta Texas has Iron Rattler. It's a RMC conversion with some awkward pacing, but exceptional moments such as, of course, that legendary drop off the quarry and the first drop and the part where you go into the wall. It's a super cool looking ride. Six Flags Great Adventure has El Toro, one of my personal favorite rides I've been on, number 2 to be exact, and it's arguably the best wooden coaster on Earth. It has arguably the best first drop, arguably the best airtime hills in the world. It's crazy, and it's not for everyone, but this ride's awesome. Next is Goliath at Six Flags. Great America. It's the RMC Topper Track one. It's RMC. It's short, but has a cool stall, has cool airtime moments. Yeah, it wins. Six Flags Great Escape is next, and with the only valid choice right now being Comet, an older but really fun looking PTC, but next year it could be Bobcat. Who knows? I might go to the park next year. I'll see then. I was a bit torn of which coaster to pick for Six Flags Magic Mountain, but I gave X2 the slight edge over Twisted Colossus for just being a more unique ride. I'm tired of talking about RMCs. X2 was a crazy experience. I'd love to experience one of the 340 coasters out there that are like this, and I don't think I'm getting to Japan or China. Six Flags New England has another close call, and though I am going to the park next year, definitely, I'm giving it to Wicked Cyclone, despite the fact that is a bit more boring being an RMC, but this or Superman the Ride are both valid options. Six Flags Over Georgia has Twisted Cyclone. I love RMC names. It's an RMC. It beats like a B&M Hyper and other solid coasters at Six Flags Over Georgia, but RMC Hybrid. Six Flags Over Texas. I could have gone with Mr. Freeze Reverse Last, but I decided to give the edge to New Texas Giant and RMC Hybrid. Oh my god, Six Flags. And for the final Six Flags park, we have Six Flags St. Louis, which Best Coaster really should be an RMC Hybrid, but since they have none, I decided to give it to American Thunder, a very solid looking GCI, over Mr. Freeze just for being a clone, and I don't know, it's probably better. I don't know which ride's better. There's like 3 good wooden coasters plus Mr. Freeze, but none of them are that good. This is a weird park. Storyland in New Hampshire has another very solid looking Gravity Groove mini small airtime coaster thing in Rorosaurus. Stricker's Grove, that one park that's open like 4 days a year or something, has 2 not great wooden coasters, but Tornado's a bit better because, the other ride's called Teddy Bear. Tomfoolery's Adventure Park in Texas, located in some Kalahari Resort or something like that, has Screamin' Centipede and SBF Visa Spinner, but it's one of the bigger ones with the one looping car. Trimper Rides in Ocean City, Maryland has Tidal Wave, a not good from personal experience Vekoma Boomerang. It beat an SBF Visa Spinner. Next, with Tropic Falls Theme Park, a park I didn't actually know changed its name from OWA, but Tropic Falls is much better. Has Rollin' Thunder, a Zamperla Thunderbolt, similar to the one at Coney Island that didn't win, but that doesn't matter. It's a rough but alright looking inverting coaster, not much to say. Okay, killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. Universal Studios Florida and Universal Studios Hollywood. Best ride is Revenge of the Mummy. They're both decently fun, dark ride coaster hybrids, not much to say, and I believe they're identical clones, but I'm not 100% sure. And then for Universal's Iowa's of Adventure, Islands of Adventure, we have the obvious choice of Velocicoaster, a really great looking, intimate, multi-launch with some crazy inversions in airtime like that Mosasaurus roll. Next is Valley Fair, with the exclamation mark, of course, one of the 2 founding Cedar Fair parks, with the obvious choice Renegade, a bit rough but very solid GCI wooden coaster. That's been like half the list, I swear. And for the finale of Small Parks in Pennsylvania, with the best coaster being a wooden coaster, we have Waldemere, a solid looking GCI that I've heard is pretty rough but also looks good. Are you guys noticing patterns with the coasters in this video? Okay, it's Walt Disney World time. First starting with Hollywood Studios with Rock and Roller Coaster, which is a Vekoma inverting coaster, but it's indoors, it's maintained well, it's a Disney ride. the overall solid. And the other Walt Disney World Resort park to have multiple coasters at it is Magic Kingdom, which I'm giving to Tron Light Cycle Run. While it's not a perfect Disney coaster, it does look decently solid with some bit awkward restraints, but great theming, great launches, overall great ride. I was on the fence whether or not to consider Washington State Fair for this list. I mean, it's only 2 weeks a year that this park is actually open, but I included Stricker's Grove, so what the heck. It's easily a classic coaster, a very classic wooden coaster that's been on the property for years and has some really crazy airtime from what I've heard. Following this is Western Playland in New Mexico with Hurricane, a ride. I genuinely do not understand what's happening with this ride. Just look it up. I don't know. Wild Adventures in somewhere in Georgia manages to have 6 coasters, but could not manage to get any coaster better than Twisted Typhoon. This lists only Vekoma SLC. It is one of the better ones by the looks of it, but it's a Vekoma SLC. Wild Waves theme park, located just outside of Seattle, has Timberhawk Ride of Prey, another SNS wooden coaster like Hellcat, but unlike Hellcat, it's less terrible. I mean, it's not a great looking ride, could use some retracking from what I've heard, but, you know, it's not Hellcat bad. Wonderland Amusement Park in Texas somewhere has Texas Tornado, and if you don't know what that is the Hopkins coaster with the loops that were profiled wrong. There's probably a picture of it on screen. It's weird, but not terrible. For the penultimate park, we have Dorney Park and Valley Fair, but better. Worlds of Fun with Prowler, which is very, very similar to Renegade. It's a rough but pretty good GCI. And finishing the list off strong, we have Yesterland Farm in Canton, Texas, a park that operates 4 kiddie coasters. The win goes to Texasaurus because the station theming looks cool, and it's the only one listed as a family coaster rather than a kiddie coaster on RCDB. This park is a joke. What was this list? Thank you all for watching this 30-minute video. I don't remember this getting that long, but sure. Make sure to like and subscribe and all that stuff. If you didn't see at the beginning, shout out to all the park's official websites for these pictures. Most of them are low quality and garbage, but you know what? Thanks for the pictures. And also, I'll do this for Europe if this video gets a lot of views, even though it's going to be like twice as long. But, you know, it was fun. Bye.